Welcome again to Precious African Tales. Today we are going to tell you an ancient story passed down through generations by grandparents and aunties to our grandparents, and from them to our parents, and finally to us. I hope you enjoy this one of my favorites. Did you ever wonder why babies cannot speak? Sometimes you can tell that a baby wants to tell you something, but all that comes out of their mouths are babbles and bubbles. That is because a long time ago, all babies spoke. Yes, you heard right. They could speak from the moment they drew breath. Do you now want to know why this changed? Join us as I tell you the tale passed down through generations, through folklore. So, in ancient times, and in the heart of a vibrant village, where the pulse of life harmonized with the rhythm of nature's melody, dwelled a couple named Noma and Uche. Uche was a hard-working farmer, and his wife Noma was loved and respected by the villagers. You would often find a gathering in her front yard of other women and their children. She always had a snack ready while everyone spent time together and caught up on village affairs. Noma and Uche had been married for a few years now, but were yet to have children. However, Noma spent a lot of time around other people's children that they felt more like her own. She hoped one day to have her own babies and have conversations with their innocent souls, something that other mothers said they enjoyed the most. Teaching the babies about the world and answering their innocent questions. In time, Noma got pregnant. Uche and Noma's hearts overflowed with joy as they looked forward to welcoming their baby. After 9 months passed, they welcomed their newborn son, Emeka. Emeka, like all infants in the village, possessed the remarkable gift of speech from the moment he took his first breath. Emeka's laughter brought warmth to the village, and his words wove tales of wonder and innocence. He was known to be an observant baby, watching and learning even when the adults were not aware he was around. During the daily gathering in front of Noma's house, Emeka always asked questions. "Why are we small and you are all bigger?" he asked the adults. "Why do voices sound different? Why can we speak but can't walk?" Now, that was an interesting question that made everyone laugh, but no one could really answer it. His mother just chuckled and said, "We don't really know, my baby boy. It has always been that way." He just looked at her with the widest curiosity-filled eyes and thought up another question. But before he could ask, she started feeding him. As time passed, Emeka's curiosity and telling the truth was definitely admired by the village. One fateful day, Uche had gone to the farm as he always did in the morning, and Noma planned to cook for her husband a special soup. She got dressed early and went to the market to buy foodstuff, such as meat, vegetables, cassava, and other ingredients to prepare this meal. On her return, she lit a fire in the area she had for cooking at the side of the front yard of their compound and started cooking the meat. As usual, she placed Emeka in an area safe and away from the fire, as he was a very curious baby. She didn't want him to hurt himself while exploring the fire. Tofiakwa, this baby that they had waited for a long time for, this made her shudder to think any harm could come to him. She looked over at him in the area she had made out on the ground, covered with one of her wrappers, and some cushions she had fashioned from folding and rolling up some clothes. Emeka was playing with some wooden toys carved for him by his dad. He always seemed to make one a month for Emeka. which made her smile in that moment. Uche was always so thoughtful. That is why she married him, she thought to herself. Noma was in her own paradise. Her son played nearby as she cooked for her husband. In a community where no one locked their doors and everyone was safe, babies could speak, there was no need to being overprotective of one's home or possessions. Noma realized that she had run out of ogiri, which is a fermented locust bean paste used to cook soup. So she ran out to get some from her friend's home nearby, barely 2 minutes away. She left Emeka to keep on playing. After all, the village was safe. Emeka noticed his mother leaving, but quietly continued playing. A little while passed, and he noticed an old lady, a neighbor of theirs, come into the compound with a piece of wood in her hand. They called her Madam Koi Koi because of the sound she made when she walked with her walking stick. Koi, 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 koi. It was customary in this village for neighbors to pop round to each other's homes to take some fire from neighbors' kitchens, to light the fires in their own kitchens. Madam Koi Koi came in and called out, "Nemo, I can see the smoke from your kitchen. Noma, are you there? Noma." Madam Koi Koi was so focused on hearing a response from Noma that she did not notice Emeka seated and playing, quietly watching Madam Koi Koi walking towards the area where his mother was cooking. Madam Koi Koi, on realizing that Noma was not in the cooking area, bent down to take some fire from the firewood and noticed the pot to the side. You see, Noma had taken the pot of meat off the firewood so that it wouldn't burn while she stepped out to get the missing ingredient. Madam Koi Koi, still bent over, opened the pot. Her eyes widened on realizing it was a pot of cooked meat. Thinking to herself of the measly meat-free dinner she was about to make for herself, she glanced around and, still not noticing Emeka watching her, ate a few pieces and wrapped a few more in her wrapper. She lit a fire branch and walked out of the compound. Emeka, on seeing her leaving, continued playing. After all, he was a baby. He did not know right from wrong yet. Noma, on returning, came over, carried Emeka, played with him a little, dropped him to the play area, and returned to the kitchen fire. She placed another pot on the fire and started cooking her egusi soup. Emeka was watching his mother cook. She added the ingredients. First, the palm oil, a red oil liquid which she poured a little into the pot, then some onions, and so on. She was singing to herself as she cooked. It came to the point where she wanted to add the cooked meat. She opened the pot, and there were only 2 pieces of meat in the pot. She looked over at Emeka. Surely not. He has no teeth yet. There was no way a baby would have eaten a full pot of meat. She glanced around, wondering who could have done it. She didn't even think to ask Emeka if he had seen anything. She was annoyed as it meant she had to return to the market and buy some more meat and get back, cook it all in time for the return of Uche. She went over to Emeka, picked him up, placed him on her back, and with her wrapper carried him on her back in the old ways that are since long forgotten. She got to the market. Some of the vendors were surprised to see her again so soon, knowing that she had only visited that morning. She mentioned the strange occurrence of finding that the meat that she had cooked had gone missing. Everyone was shocked, as they did not steal from each other in this village. She bought some more meat, although they weren't as good as the cut of meat she had bought earlier. But it would be okay for the dinner, she thought as she returned home. She was still annoyed as she hoped that she would have been able to come up with another explanation other than someone came into her kitchen and stole her cooked meat. She came back home and had to restart the process of cooking the meat for the soup again. She managed to get it all ready in time for the return of her hard-working husband. She served him some soup and gari, and some for herself too. As they ate, she recounted the tale of the missing meat to her husband, who listened attentively. Out of nowhere, Emeka, with a smile on his face, said, "Koi, koi, koi, koi." Noma glanced over to Emeka and said, "Yes, koi, koi. You sound like the noise that Madam Koi Koi makes." Emeka giggled. "Koi, koi came with a fire stick." Noma looked at Emeka curiously, but wanted to continue her conversation with her husband. So she continued to Uche. "Can you imagine if there is now a thief in this village?" Emeka, still giggling and playing with his wooden toy, said, "Koi, koi," looked around. Noma, still engrossed in her chat with her husband and on the events of the day, until she heard the words, "Koi, koi, open the pot." She glanced over at Emeka, who was still smiling and giggling. "Mwam, Emmy, what did you say? Kedihi kwuru." Emeka glanced up at his mom from his toy with his dad in the background and said, "Koi, koi, open the pot. Koi, koi, ate meat," and continued playing with his toy, hitting it on the ground. In that moment, the room spun. Noma could not believe it. Damborie, the true name of Madame Koi Koi, stole the meat from her own kitchen. She turned around and glanced up at her husband to check that he had heard the same thing. He too was shocked. Babies don't lie. And he glanced back at her. Noma stood up, walked over to Emeka and picked him up. And Uche walked over to the both of them and said to Noma, "This must be addressed with the village chief." Noma was not in support of going straight to the village chief, but rather to address it directly with Da Imborie. She said to her husband, "Let me speak to her directly." "Don't worry, my husband. There has to be an explanation. I will speak to her." She cuddled Emeka and got him ready for bed. The next morning, Uche raised the matter with Noma again. This village does not have thieves, and if there is one, it has to be brought to the attention of the village chief and addressed. Noma was the kind of woman who wanted to understand why that happened, something that Uche loved about her. He set off to the farm, and Noma proceeded to complete her daily tasks, which included sweeping the front yard, bathing Emeka, feeding him, and cleaning up the house. When she was done, she got dressed and set off to speak with Dame Mborie. Firstly, she dropped Emeka off with her sister, who lived close by. Remember, the one that she went to get the missing ingredient from when this all happened. On getting to Da Mborie's house, she stood in front of the mat-covered front door and said, "Bye, bye, 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 boy, 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 boy. Is anyone home?" She could hear some shuffling inside, but waited patiently for a response. From inside, she heard a voice, faint and croaky, say, "Yes." "Obronye, who is that?" "Anna Mabiao, I'm coming." As the shuffling came closer and the sound, "Koi, koi, koi, koi," Noma stepped back as the mat was moved to the side, and Da Mborie's face peered through the side, and she stepped outside her hut. She greeted Noma with a gap-toothed grin. "Noma, my daughter, welcome. How are you?" "Good afternoon, Mama," Noma greeted. "I am well. How are you, Mama?" "Afutalam," replied Ndamborie. We are thankful to Amadioha. I cannot complain, but age. She trailed off and smiled to Noma. She motioned Noma to take a seat on the long bench that was outside the front of her hut. Noma waited for her to take a seat first before she sat down. Damumbori started with, "I hope all is well, my child," looking curiously into Noma's face. Noma, not knowing how to start, hesitated, paused, and then took a look at Damumbori's face. She looked old and tired, but why didn't she act like she knew what this call was about? Noma started, "Mama, something unusual happened yesterday in my kitchen." Oh. She paused, searching for the right next words. Damumbori remained quiet and adjusted her wrapper. "Yes, my daughter, what was it?" "Well, Mama, I left to get some ogiri from Amaka's house yesterday afternoon, and I left some cooked meat in the kitchen. By the time I got back, it was all gone, except for 2 small pieces of meat." Damumbori's face was one of gap-toothed surprise. "How did that happen?" she asked. Noma, reluctant to continue, said, "This village has no thieves, and things have a way of coming out." She continued, "Emeka was in the front yard yesterday, and while I was eating with his father yesterday evening, he narrated what he saw. Emeka saw you do it." Damumbori, with a face of shock and disdain, suddenly shouted, "It's a lie. Emeka is lying. He is a baby. What does he know? I didn't take any meat from your kitchen." She proceeded to ask Noma to leave. She shouted at her to never come back unless she was bringing back her son to apologize. She shouted as Noma stepped over the threshold of Damumbori's compound. Noma was in shock. Damumbori stole from her and then denied it to her face, and even proceeded to call her baby a liar. Wait till Uche hears all about this. He will certainly take this to the village chief. Why didn't she tell the truth? She was now a little worried, as she had never seen her like that. She always thought her to be like a mother for all within this village. There has to be something sinister with her, especially with that reaction. She proceeded to go visit her sister and to pick up Emeka. She didn't think it wise to mention the events to anyone else until she had spoken to her husband on his return. She spent some time with her sister playing with all the children, and then returned home where she made some yam porridge for dinner in time for her husband's return. Uche, on returning home, asked her if she had spoken to Damumbori. She responded, "Let's eat first, then I will tell you all about it." Emeka was busy asking questions and recounting all he did that day at his auntie's house in the background, while Noma proceeded to tell Uche all about Damumbori's response. She denied it, and then she said Emeka, an innocent baby that doesn't know right from wrong, was lying. Uche was furious. "We are definitely taking this to the village chief first thing tomorrow morning." Early next morning, Uche got dressed, but Noma was still not sure this was the best course of action and wanted to find another way to handle it that wouldn't bring any shame to an old woman. Uche's stance was that she was a thief and must be exposed and dealt with according to the village custom. So after some breakfast of remaining yam porridge, off they went to see the village chief at almost midday. The village chief and his councillors welcomed him and his wife. The chief's wife, who was also present, came and carried Emeka and took Noma away to keep her company while Uche addressed the village chief and the councillors. Uche narrated the events to the village chief, who asked to speak to Noma directly. He sent one of the servants to call Noma. Noma and the village chief's wife, Adugo, returned to the gathering and greeted the chief and the councillors again. Noma, carrying Emeka, was asked to sit down and tell them all about the encounter with Damumburi. Noma narrated the events, how she was narrating the story of the missing cooked meat to her husband, and Emeka narrated what he saw while she was out, how Madame Koi Koi came with a fire stick. Koi Koi looked around. Koi Koi opened the pot, and at this point of the narration, Emeka looked up at his mum, smiling, and said, Koi Koi opened the pot. Koi Koi ate meat. The councillors were shocked and looked at each other, hardly believing what came out of the baby's mouth. Noma stroked Emeka's head and said, Yes, that is what Emeka said that night that made me go to speak to Damumburi. The next day, she trailed off. But she shouted at me to get out of her house and not come back with lies told by a baby. At this point, the chief shook his head. One of the councillors present stated, But babies don't lie. We all know this. They do not know how to lie. Yes, agreed another councillor. It is unheard of to think or accuse a baby of lying. We must speak to Damumburi. The chief raised his hand for silence and spoke directly to Noma and Uche. We will speak to Damumburi about this event. Uche and Noma took their leave and left the gathering of the councillors and headed home. The next day, the chief called for Damumburi and also for Noma and Uche to join them in the afternoon. When they had all gathered, the chief's councillor stood up to narrate the events as told by Noma to the hearing of Damumburi, who got visibly angry with each sentence, and it seemed the weather began to change as she got angrier. The chief and all those present gave darting glances to the weather outside, curious to understand its sudden change and ensure there was no danger to them or their households. The speaker stopped and asked if there was any truth to the information received. Damumburi, in a dark voice, said no. And at the same time, there was thunder and lightning outside. Most people shook it off as a coincidence, but the wise seer, observing the event, stood up and asked to speak. He slowly limped towards Damumburi, who now had a smirk on her face. He stopped right in front of her, turned and faced Damumburi, and asked, Who are you? We will have to stop there for now. Who do you think Damumburi, or shall I say Madame Koi Koi, really is? Join us next time to find out, and also how babies really lost that ability to speak.